The world usually has the decency to let you finish a good dream before it tries to kill you. Not today. Today, the world decided my REM cycle was entirely optional. It started at 5:14 a.m. I was dreaming I'd finally perfected a silent, solar-powered leaf blower, a device that would make me a billionaire and a hero to dads everywhere. I was about to accept the Nobel Prize for Suburban Peace when the shaking started. It was a gentle shudder at first, like a fat cat jumping on the bed. Then the cat invited its extended family of sumo wrestlers over for a mosh pit. My eyes snapped open. The bedside lamp was doing a frantic tango. The house wasn't just shaking, it was groaning, a deep, guttural sound like a dying beast. Picture frames slapped against the wall, and from the kitchen came the distinct, heartbreaking clatter of my prized vintage thermos collection. Son of a... I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the floor just as the main event kicked into high gear. The floorboards swayed like the deck of a ship in a storm. I'm a construction project manager by trade. I know what a building is supposed to do, and this wasn't it. I stumbled through the hallway, my hands out like a zombie, bracing against the lurching walls. My first thought wasn't fear. It was a deep, soul-crushing annoyance. My house, you see, is retrofitted to hell and back. I spent a small fortune reinforcing shear walls, bolting the foundation, and strapping the water heater. I'd done everything short of building a personal bunker because I'm a professional overthinker. This earthquake wasn't a threat. It was just going to be a colossal mess to clean up. In the living room, my golden retriever, Buster, was having the time of his life. A chunk of drywall had fallen, and he was gleefully chewing on it, tail thumping a frantic rhythm against the floor, as if to say, "This is great! The wall is a snack now!" I scooped him up. "No, you moron! That's not a milk bone!" The shaking subsided, leaving a ringing silence broken only by Buster's indignant whining and the distant chorus of car alarms. I put him down, grabbed my phone, and flicked on the flashlight. A quick survey showed mostly cosmetic damage: fallen books, a cracked window pane, and the tragic scene in the kitchen where my 1950s Aladdin thermos lay on the floor, its red plaid finish tragically dented. I took a moment to mourn. Then I did what any responsible adult does after a natural disaster. I called my sister to make sure I wasn't the only one whose morning was ruined. "You still have a house?" I asked when she picked up. Her voice was shaky. "Barely. The garden gnomes have unionized and are demanding hazard pay. You?" "Buster's fine. The house is fine," I reported, nudging the drywall chunk with my foot. "My Nespresso machine is giving me the silent treatment, though. It's serious, Sarah. The little light is just blinking, mocking me." "You and your coffee," she sighed. "Turn on the news, Jack. It's bad in the old downtown district." I clicked off the call and found the remote. The TV flickered to life, showing scenes a few miles away that made my stomach clench. It wasn't just broken tchotchkes over there. It was collapsed brick facades, shattered storefronts, and water from burst mains flooding the streets. The local community center, a small building from the 70s, was already overwhelmed. A harried-looking reporter was standing in front of it, talking about the immediate need for everything: water, blankets, non-perishable food, and especially diapers and baby formula. I looked around my quiet, sturdy house. I looked at Buster, who had given up on the wall and was now trying to befriend a fallen lampshade. I thought about my garage. It wasn't just a place to park my car. It was a testament to my chronic overpreparation. It held enough camping gear to outfit a small army, a pantry that could comfortably see us through the zombie apocalypse, and enough bottled water to fill a small swimming pool. A reluctant sense of duty started to creep in, smothering my annoyance. Damn it. "Fine," I said out loud to the dog. "Fine. I'm a logistical genius with a garage full of life-saving crap, and nothing better to do today than re-grout the bathroom tile." I guess I could stand to be a people person for a few days. For charity or something. My driveway was wide. My garage was organized. The plan forming in my head wasn't born from pure altruism. It was born from my pathological need for efficiency. The community center was a bottleneck. I could be a solution. A simple, elegant, logistical solution. "All right, Buster," I said, striding toward the garage. "Let's go rectify a situation." If you're going to do something, you do it right. You don't just throw open the doors and hope for the best. That's how you get chaos. That's how you get a pile of useless junk and a traffic jam. No, you create a system. I grabbed a roll of masking tape and a thick black marker. Within 20 minutes, my driveway looked like a miniature airport runway. I laid out a clear one-way path for cars, with a lane for drop-offs and a separate area for sorting. I hauled out 3 folding tables and set them up in the open garage, slapping on labels I'd printed in a bold, no-nonsense font. Water and drinks, canned goods and non-perishables, blankets and clothing, baby supplies and diapers. And because Buster insisted, a box labeled "Things for Fido." I donned my brightest high-visibility vest, a leftover from a worksite visit, and sent a single, concise email to the Maple Creek Estates Neighborhood Watch Group. Subject: Quake Relief Depot, 124 Orchard Lane. Body morning all. For those looking to help, I've set up a temporary, organized donation point at my place. Drive-through system in effect. We need water, canned goods, blankets, and baby supplies. No need to get out of your car. I'll be here all day. Let's be efficient. Thanks, Jack. I hit send and, for good measure, made a pot of coffee in my backup French press. I stood at the end of my driveway, sipping from a mug, feeling the satisfying hum of a plan in motion. This wasn't just helping. This was a logistical ballet, and I was its director. The response was immediate. Before I'd finished my coffee, the first minivan pulled up. It was the Martinez family from 2 streets over. Their 3 kids, all under 10, hopped out and started unloading armfuls of their own blankets and stuffed animals, their faces a mixture of solemnity and excitement. Mrs. Martinez rolled down her window. "This is a wonderful thing you're doing, Jack." "Just trying to keep things moving," I said, directing one of the kids to the right table. "Thanks for this. It's a huge help." Next came Mr. Henderson, an elderly widower from the corner house. He shuffled up, holding a single, pristine can of albacore tuna. It looked like it had been polished. "It's the good stuff, son," he said, his voice raspy. "Packed in oil, not that water nonsense." I took it from him with the gravity it deserved. "Mr. Henderson, this tuna is going to make someone's day. Thank you." He nodded, satisfied, and shuffled back home. Before long, a small crowd of volunteers had formed. Dave, a fellow cynic from down the street who shared my deep distrust of organized fun, showed up. He didn't bring donations. He brought his massive barbecue grill on wheels. "Figured if we're gonna save the world, we might as well do it with a full stomach," he announced, sparking the propane. "Want a hot dog? First one's on the house." "Only if it's been properly zoned for consumption," I shot back. He tossed me a perfectly charred dog in a bun. "Don't worry, I filed the paperwork in triplicate." The day took on a rhythm. Cars would pull in, volunteers would swarm, unload supplies, and wave them on. Dave kept everyone fed. The Martinez kids appointed themselves official morale officers, handing out drawings to everyone. A real sense of community was building right there in my driveway. People were laughing, sharing stories of the quake, checking on each other. For the first time since I'd moved into this beige-colored, meticulously manicured suburban enclave, it actually felt like a neighborhood. I found myself, to my own surprise, enjoying it. Just a little. It was in the mid-afternoon, during a lull in traffic, that I saw it. A pristine, white Lexus SUV cruising down the street at a funereal pace. It slowed as it passed my house, the tinted window hiding the driver, but I didn't need to see her to know who it was. The car itself radiated an aura of disapproval. It was Carol Peterson, HOA president. "And there she is," I muttered to Dave, "the high priestess of beige, the architect of our aesthetic misery." "Carol?" Dave asked, flipping a burger. "Uh-oh. Does she know about this?" "She knows now." The Lexus completed its slow pass and disappeared around the corner. I had a bad feeling, the kind of feeling you get when you see a storm cloud on a sunny day. Carol was a woman who once sent me a violation notice because my garden hose wasn't coiled in a counterclockwise direction. She lived for the rustle of violation notices and the fearful compliance of her neighbors. A chaotic, unpermitted, and frankly helpful operation like mine was not going to sit well with her. An hour later, my fears were laminated. Tucked neatly under my truck's windshield wiper was a sheet of paper, sealed in plastic to protect it from the elements, or perhaps from the tears of the non-compliant. I pulled it out. The masthead was pretentious, written in a flowing script. Maple Creek Estates, Homeowners Association. Official notice of potential bylaw infraction. To resident of 124 Orchard Lane. It has come to our attention that your property is being utilized for activities that may constitute an unsanctioned commercial or charitable enterprise. See Bylaw 7.4. C. Use of property. Furthermore, the presence of non-standard vehicular traffic and temporary structures, folding tables, may violate aesthetic covenants. Bylaw 9.2. A. Visual harmony of the community. Please rectify this situation at your earliest convenience to avoid further action. A tidy neighborhood is a happy neighborhood. Carol Peterson, President. I read it once. Then I read it again, the words swimming in their sheer, unadulterated absurdity. Rectify the situation? Is that what she called helping people after an earthquake? An aesthetic violation? I looked at the tables piled high with diapers and formula. I looked at the boxes of water waiting to be loaded. I looked at Dave, who was handing a hot dog to one of the Martinez kids. "Aesthetic violation," I said, showing the notice to Dave. He read it and let out a low whistle. Wow, she's got guts, or a black hole where her heart should be. "Lady, the Earth's crust just did the cha-cha," I said to the notice in my hand. "I think we can let the folding tables slide." I crumpled it up, laminate and all, and tossed it into a nearby trash bag. It was a declaration of war, and I had just thrown the gauntlet back in her face. I was too busy, too focused on the good we were doing, to take it seriously. That was my mistake. I had underestimated the awesome, terrible power of a petty person with a rule book. The final act of the day's drama began around 4:30 p.m. We were at peak efficiency. A small box truck, driven by a volunteer from a local church, had just backed into the driveway. We'd formed a human chain, passing boxes of supplies, water, canned chili, blankets, up into the truck. The mood was high. We were about to send off our first major shipment. That's when she arrived. Carol Peterson didn't drive this time. She came on foot, a tactical decision designed to maximize confrontation. She was wearing pressed khaki pants, a crisp white polo shirt, and a visor. And she was armed. In her hand she held a thick, 3-ring binder, held against her chest like a shield. Her clipboard of judgment. She planted herself at the end of the driveway, right behind the truck, her arms crossed. Her presence immediately sucked the cheerful energy out of the air. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and carrying. "Excuse me, this has to stop. Immediately!" The human chain faltered. Everyone turned to look. I sighed, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and walked over to meet her. This was not a negotiation. This was a showdown. "Carol," I said, my voice deliberately calm. "Nice of you to come down from your ivory tower." You bring a donation?" Her eyes narrowed. "I have brought a cease and desist," she said, tapping the binder. "This is an unauthorized depot. It's a violation of half a dozen HOA covenants. It's unsightly, it's causing a disturbance, and it's attracting traffic." She said the word traffic like it was a swarm of locusts. "It's called neighbors helping neighbors, Carol," I shot back, keeping my voice low. The volunteers were watching. "It's a novel concept. You should look it up sometime. Maybe it's in that book of yours." "This is not a discussion," she snapped, her voice rising. "I gave you a warning. You ignored it. I am the president of this homeowners association, and you are in direct violation of the rules. I've already called the authorities to have this area cleared." My blood ran cold. The authorities? For collecting diapers? Before I could respond, a low siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. A single police cruiser turned onto Orchard Lane and pulled up to the curb. 2 officers got out. They looked young, tired, and deeply, profoundly unimpressed to be here. Their names, I'd later learn, were Miller and Davis. Officer Miller, the taller of the 2, approached Carol. "Ma'am, you called about a disturbance?" "Yes, officer," Carol said, her voice dripping with vindication. "This man is running an illegal distribution center from his home. It's a clear violation of our community's legally binding covenants." I stepped forward. "Evening, officers. My name's Jack Riley. We're just collecting some relief supplies for the folks who got hit hard by the quake this morning." Officer Davis, the younger one, glanced past me at the tables piled high with baby formula and water bottles. He looked at the waiting truck. "Looks like a good thing you're doing here, sir," he said, a note of sympathy in his voice. Carol was having none of it. "It's against the rules," she insisted, shoving the thick binder into Officer Miller's hands. "Those are legally binding civil contracts. He is in violation. You have to make him stop." Officer Miller sighed the sigh of a man who dealt with people like Carol all day, every day. He took the binder and flipped through it, his finger tracing a line down a page. He looked from the book to my driveway depot, then back to me. His expression was apologetic. "Look, sir," he said, his voice quiet. "I hate to say it, but technically, she's right. An HOA agreement is a civil contract. We can't let you block a public sidewalk with your tables, and this covenant she's pointing to, about running an unzoned distribution or charitable enterprise, well, it's here in black and white." He handed the binder back to Carol, who accepted it with a smug little smile. "I'm really sorry, sir," Officer Davis added. "But we have to ask you to shut it down. It's a civil matter. If you don't comply, she can take you to court. We're just here to prevent a breach of the peace." Defeat tasted like ashes. The volunteers, who had been watching in stunned silence, began to disperse, murmuring their disbelief. The driver of the box truck gave me a helpless shrug. He couldn't wait around. He closed the back of his half-empty truck and drove away. And Carol stood there, through it all. Arms crossed, that sickeningly triumphant smirk plastered on her face. She had won. She had looked at a group of people trying to do something decent, something necessary, and had seen nothing but an untidy lawn, and it made her happy. I just stared at her, the anger in my chest burning cold and sharp. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was about malice. She'd weaponized beige conformity and used it to stop people from getting help. That's when it happened. The gears in my head, which had been grinding in frustration, suddenly clicked into place. They began to mesh and turn, assembling themselves into a beautiful, terrible, and perfectly, unimpeachably legal machine. She wants rules? Oh, I'll give her rules. She wants me to rectify the situation. I'm going to rectify this situation right into her worst nightmare. I turned my back on her, walked into the quiet of my garage, and pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my face. I was smiling now, too. The time was 4:57 p.m. The 3-minute countdown had begun. Carol lingered, basking in the glow of her victory. She surveyed my now empty driveway, the scene of her triumph, with the smug satisfaction of a cat who had just pushed a priceless vase off a shelf. The silence of the street was her trophy. She probably thought I'd gone inside to sulk. She was wrong. I'd gone inside to reload. Inside the garage, phone pressed to my ear, I was a man possessed. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a core of ice-cold clarity. 3 minutes. That's how long it took her to dismantle a day's worth of goodwill. 3 minutes. It seemed like a good number, a poetic number, a perfect countdown timer for the launch of my new project, Operation Petty Revenge. My first call was to Frank Rizzo. Frank is a legend in the local construction scene. He's a 60-something, grizzled crane operator who has probably forgotten more about heavy machinery than I'll ever know. His company, Rizzo and Sons Lifting, has a fleet of machines that could rearrange a city block. "Frankie, it's Jack Riley," I said, my voice low and even. "Riley," his gravelly voice crackled back. "Figured I'd hear from you after the shaker. What'd you break?" "Nothing yet, Frank. But the day is young. I need a favor. An emergency weekend rate supply kind of favor." "I'm listening." "I need your 100-ton Tadano, and 2 of its friends. Let's say, the 75-ton Grove, and maybe the little 50-ton Link Belt for support." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him chewing on a toothpick. "3 rigs? Jack, what in God's name are you lifting? Did a meteor land in your backyard?" "Let's call it a home beautification project," I said smoothly. "Very delicate, precision work. Full hazard and inconvenient surcharge authorized. The question is, Frank, how fast can you get 3 of your finest machines to Maple Creek Estates?" He whistled. "The Estates, huh? Posh. Give me 20 minutes to round up the boys. Where do you want us?" "Stage on the corner of Elm and Main, 2 blocks south of my place. Wait for my signal. And Frank, make sure the lights are flashing." I hung up and immediately dialed my next number. Maria Garcia. She runs the back office for a big general contracting firm I work with. She's a wizard with permits and paperwork. "Maria, it's Jack. Drop everything. I need you to file an emergency permit application online, right now." "Jack, are you okay? Is your house falling down?" "No, but my faith in humanity is. It's a preventative measure. I need you to file for soil testing and a foundation assessment at my address. Cite seismic activity concerns. Should be fast-tracked because of the quake." "Okay. Soil testing and foundation, so... Got it. Anything else?" "As a matter of fact, yes," I said, a grin spreading across my face. "While you're in the system, can you also draft up a work order for the installation of a... let's see, a 30-foot steel flagpole?" "Yeah, that sounds patriotic. Send me the confirmation numbers the second you have them." "A flagpole. Jack, what is going on?" "Just being a good citizen, Maria. A very, very good citizen." Final call. A 24/7 traffic management company I'd used on a downtown job last year. "This is Jack Riley. I need a flagger crew and a dozen traffic cones delivered to 124 Orchard Lane, immediately. We're expecting a significant heavy equipment delivery in," I glanced at my watch, "the next 10 minutes. With the calls made, I grabbed the thick HOA handbook from a drawer in my workbench, the one Carol had so kindly quoted from earlier. I'd read it cover to cover the day I moved in, not out of respect, but out of professional curiosity. I wanted to know the enemy. Now its pages felt less like rules and more like a menu of options. I found the section I was looking for. Bylaw 11.2. D. Major home improvements, including landscaping and structural additions, are permitted with the submission of proper municipal permits and must be completed in a timely manner. It was a beautiful sentence, so full of potential. It said major improvements were allowed, It said structural additions were fine, but it said absolutely nothing about the size, scale, or sheer, unadulterated absurdity of the equipment one might use to perform said improvements. And that little loophole was wide enough to drive 3 cranes through. I walked to the edge of my garage and looked out. Carol was still there, now talking to another neighbor, probably recounting her heroic defense of the neighborhood's beigeness. She was about to learn a very important lesson. You don't bring a rule book to a logistics fight. I met Frank and his crew on the corner of Elm and Main, a staging area just out of sight of my street. It was a motley collection of guys who looked like they gargled with diesel fuel and ate gravel for breakfast. Frank was leaning against the grill of his pickup, arms crossed. "All right, Riley, lay it on me," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "What's the real job? We moving a house? Pulling a rogue oak tree out of a swimming pool?" "Even better," I said, holding up my phone to show him the permit numbers from Maria. "We are installing a flagpole." Frank squinted at me. His crew stopped their chatter and stared. A long, awkward silence hung in the air. "Let me get this straight," Frank said slowly, as if talking to a crazy person. "You called in my 3 best heavy-lift cranes on a Saturday, on emergency rates, to install a goddamn flagpole?" "And," I added, unable to contain my smirk, "to perform some very, very thorough roof and foundation inspections. With the cranes, I'm thinking we should probably inspect the roof shingles, one by one." "The point isn't the work, Frank. The point is the process. It needs to be big. It needs to be loud. It needs to be inconvenient as all hell. And most importantly, it needs to be impeccably, annoyingly legal." A flicker of understanding crossed Frank's face. Then his leathery features broke into a slow, wide grin that showed most of his teeth. He got it. He really got it. "Oh," he chuckled, a low rumble that came from his chest. "Oh, I see. It's one of those jobs." He turned to his crew. "It's an HOA job, boys." A wave of knowing laughter and appreciative nods went through the crew. They'd been here before. They knew this dance. "All right," Frank bellowed, slapping the hood of his truck. "You heard the man. Fire him up. We're gonna go do some inspections. Let's go make some noise." The time was 5 p.m., exactly 3 minutes after the last of my volunteers had sadly departed. Carol was just turning to walk back to her house, her shoulders squared with self-satisfaction, victory secured. That's when she must have heard it. It started as a low rumble. A vibration felt more in the bones than in the ears. It wasn't an aftershock. This was a man-made rumble, the sound of pure, concentrated industrial power. The sound grew louder, resolving itself into the distinct chug of massive diesel engines, the sharp hiss of air brakes, and the insistent, rhythmic beep-beep-beep of reversing alarms. Then, the first one appeared. Frank's 100-ton Tadano crane, a monster of yellow steel, turned the corner onto our quiet, tree-lined suburban street. Its amber hazard lights were flashing, painting the evening in strobes of orange. It was so big it had to take the turn in 2 passes. It was followed immediately by the 75-ton Grove, and then the smaller, nimbler Link Belt. Behind them, a flatbed truck carrying traffic cones and orange-vested flaggers pulled up, and the crew jumped out, immediately starting to direct the non-existent traffic with an air of grave importance. The convoy rolled down Orchard Lane like a conquering army. Trees trembled, windows rattled, small dogs started barking hysterically. I was watching from my front porch, a fresh mug of coffee in hand. It was beautiful. It was a ballet, but with more horsepower and a distinct lack of subtlety. Each truck was a rolling 40-ton middle finger plated in chrome. Each flashing light was a tiny beacon of my righteous indignation. Carol stopped dead in her tracks. Her jaw didn't just drop. It looked like it was trying to unhinge itself and flee the scene. Her face, which moments before had been a mask of smug triumph, was now a canvas of pure, uncomprehending horror. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She ran toward the problem, clipboard held aloft, ready to impose order on the chaos. She confronted Frank, who had just hopped out of his pickup. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What is going on? You can't park these monsters here." Frank, a master of deadpan delivery, pulled a work order from his own clipboard and squinted at it. "Ma'am, says here we have a permitted job at 124 Orchard Lane. Just doing what we're paid to do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a foundation to assess." "This is a residential street," Carol sputtered, gesturing wildly. "My husband is trying to nap." That was my cue. I took a leisurely sip of coffee and shouted from my porch, my voice carrying across the now crowded lawn. "Hey, Carol, just getting that rectification done like you asked. Decided to start with a new flagpole for patriotism." The look she gave me could have curdled milk. If looks could kill, I'd be a smoking crater on my own front porch. The symphony of malicious compliance began. The first crane, the giant Tadano, started to deploy its outriggers. They extended with a series of hydraulic whines and finished with 4 thunderous clunks as the massive steel pads met the ground. One of them, in a completely unforeseen and tragic accident, landed just 2 inches over the property line, directly on top of Carol's prize-winning peace rosebush. It wasn't a bush anymore. It was a green smudge on the grass. "Whoops." "Sorry, ma'am," one of the workers yelled without looking at her. "Gotta stabilize the rig." Carol just made a small, strangled sound. Then, the crane's boom began to rise. It was a slow, majestic, and utterly terrifying process. A giant metal finger, unfolding and pointing straight at the sky, casting a long shadow that fell directly across Carol's house. The sound of it, the groaning steel, the whining hydraulics, was sweeter than any symphony. The project itself was a masterpiece of performative inefficiency. The first crane, its mighty boom now fully extended, lowered its hook. Attached to it was not a steel beam or a concrete block, but a single, comically small, red toolbox. The operator swung it with painstaking slowness and precision over my lawn and gently deposited it on the grass. The entire operation took 15 minutes. Meanwhile, the second crane used its massive hook to lower a single yellow measuring tape to the ground next to my driveway, where a worker spent an absurd amount of time pretending to take measurements. The third crane just sat there, its engine rumbling at a steady, ground-shaking idle, its lights flashing. Its official purpose? Traffic control and site observation. Dave, my barbecue-providing co-conspirator, had returned, drawn by the commotion. He was holding a bag of popcorn. "A flagpole, huh?" he said, shaking his head in admiration. "You gotta respect the flag, Dave," I said solemnly. "And does respecting the flag require 300 tons of German and American engineering?" "In this particular case, absolutely," I replied. "It's a very, very respectable flag." Carol, predictably, was losing her mind. She was pacing back and forth on her lawn, her phone glued to her ear. I could only imagine the conversations she was having. She was probably screaming at the city manager, the chief of police, maybe even the governor, demanding that someone, anyone, stop this madness. But the gears of bureaucracy, especially when greased with legitimate permits, turned slowly. No one was coming to save her. Of course, she called the cops again. This time she must have dialed 911 and used words like terrorizing and imminent danger. Because 2 cruisers arrived, their sirens cutting through the rumble of the engines. Officers Miller and Davis were back, and they'd brought their boss, a weary-looking, mustachioed veteran named Sergeant Cobb. He looked like a man who had seen every form of human stupidity and was long past the point of being surprised. Sergeant Cobb lumbered out of his car and surveyed the scene. 3 massive cranes, a dozen men in hard hats, a hysterical woman on one lawn, and me calmly sipping coffee on another. He walked over to me first. "All right, son, let's talk," he said, his voice tired but firm. "Mrs. Peterson over there seems to be under the impression that you're trying to declare independence from the United States and have formed your own construction-themed army." I couldn't help but smile. I was ready for this. I held up the neat folder Maria had emailed me, which I'd already printed out. "Sergeant, good to see you again," I said respectfully. "No declarations of independence today, just a bit of home improvement. Here are my permits. Emergency foundation assessment, approved this afternoon by the city. You'll find the file number at the top. Work order for a flagpole installation. And my traffic management plan, filed with the Public Works Department. All my ducks are in a neat, orderly row." Sergeant Cobb took the folder and began to read. Carol hurried over, her face blotchy with rage. "He's doing it to spite me!" she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. "It's a sham! He's terrorizing the neighborhood with these things!" The sergeant didn't look at her. He just kept reading, his eyes flicking from the permits to the cranes and back to me. When he was done, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. He looked up at me, his expression deadpan. "Sir, I have to ask. Is it absolutely necessary to use a 100-ton crane to inspect your roof shingles?" I met his gaze, my face a mask of earnest concern. "Safety first, Sergeant. After the quake this morning, you just can't be too careful. I want a real close look at the structural integrity, from a safe distance." The sergeant nodded slowly, as if this were the most reasonable explanation in the world. He handed the permits back to me and then turned to Carol. His professional weariness settled back over him like a heavy blanket. "Ma'am, his paperwork is in order. He is in full compliance with all city ordinances. This is a civil matter between you, him, and your homeowners association." He gestured vaguely at the chaos. "There's nothing we can do." Carol's face crumpled. But it's obnoxious," she stammered. Sergeant Cobb allowed himself a sour, dry chuckle. "Ma'am," he said, turning to leave, "there's no law against being obnoxious. If there were, our jails would be a lot fuller." He gave me a subtle, almost invisible nod before getting back in his car. The police left. Carol was left standing in the middle of the street, bathed in the flashing amber lights of my legally permitted, fully insured, and utterly vindictive crane convoy. The look on her face wasn't anger anymore. It was the blank, hollow shock of total and complete defeat. I raised my mug in a silent toast. Checkmate. The next morning, the residents of Orchard Lane awoke to a new reality. The sun rose, the birds chirped, and the low, throbbing rumble of 3 diesel engines provided the street's new baseline. The siege had begun. The work continued at its gloriously unhurried pace. The Tadano crane spent the first 2 hours of the day lifting a single 50-pound bag of concrete mix from the flatbed truck and swinging it, with the majestic grace of a stalking heron, onto my driveway. It was a journey of about 15 feet that took longer than a feature film. The neighborhood had become a tourist destination. Mr. Henderson had set up a lawn chair and a pair of binoculars, as if he were bird-watching. The Martinez kids were on their front lawn with sketch pads, furiously drawing pictures of the mechanical behemoths. And Dave, ever the entrepreneur, had expanded his barbecue operation. He was now serving coffee and breakfast burritos to the crane operators and the growing crowd of curious onlookers from adjacent streets. A large hand-painted sign had appeared in a window across from my house. "Go, Jack, go." Of course, not everyone was thrilled. I could see a few of Carol's loyalists, the other members of the HOA's beige committee, peering out from behind their curtains, their faces pinched with disapproval, but they were a silent, cowed minority. No one wanted to be the next person to have a 100-ton crane accidentally crush their prize-winning petunias. My goal for the day was psychological warfare, waged within the precise letter of the law. I had Frank's crew start up a commercial-grade pressure washer to clean my driveway. The high-pitched scream of the machine echoed through the neighborhood for 4 solid hours. After that, we moved on to the soil density testing phase of the foundation assessment. This involved one of the smaller cranes repeatedly lifting a 500-pound metal plate about 10 feet in the air and dropping it onto my lawn. Thump. A 10-second pause. Thump. Birds fleeing from trees. Thump. It was maddeningly, beautifully, legally annoying. Carol had retreated into her house, but I knew she could hear it. I knew she could feel it. Every thump was a reminder of her spectacular miscalculation. "You're an evil genius," Dave said, handing me a burrito over my fence. "I'm just a guy who reads the fine print," I replied, taking a bite. She thought she was playing checkers, but I was playing 4D chess on a board of her own making. Every rule she loved, every clause she worshipped, was now a weapon in my arsenal, and I was just getting started. Around midday on day 3 of the siege, there was a new development. A man I'd never seen before emerged from Carol's front door. He was a meek-looking fellow in a pastel golf shirt and pleated khaki shorts, with an air of permanent apology about him. He scurried across the lawn, avoiding eye contact with the crane operators, and approached my front porch. It had to be Stan Peterson, Carol's mysterious, oft-napped husband. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Riley." "That's me," I said, not getting up from my chair. "Here to admire the pre-installation phase of my new flagpole?" Stan flinched. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung under his eyes. I imagined it was hard to sleep when your house was ground zero for a low-grade industrial project. "Look, he stammered, wringing his hands. Can we make this stop? Carol, she hasn't been herself." I almost laughed. Oh, I think for the first time in a long time, she's facing the consequences of being herself. This all stops when the original problem gets rectified, and I don't mean my driveway, Stan, I mean the real problem. He sighed, a deep, defeated sound. "The relief supplies. I know, I told her it was a bad idea. I am so sorry. She just gets carried away with the rules." "Well, so do I said, gesturing to the crane that was now meticulously inspecting my chimney, brick by brick, with a high-powered camera on a long pole. "Tell her my offer stands. A public apology and the full reinstatement of the relief depot. Otherwise, tomorrow we start the aerial shingle inspection." Stan just nodded miserably and shuffled back to his house, a prisoner of war returning to his cell. The final crack in Carol's empire came that evening. Under the glow of the crane's work lights, a crowd was gathering on the lawn of the house between mine and the Petersons. It was an emergency HOA meeting, called by Dave. It was a coup. Dave stood on a plastic cooler, addressing the assembled homeowners. I could hear every word from my porch. "For years, we've put up with it," he declared, his voice full of barbecue-fueled passion. "The notices about the wrong shade of white on our trim. The fines for leaving a garbage can out for 10 extra minutes. But this is too far. She shut down an earthquake relief drive. And now, thanks to her, our street looks like a landing zone for the Autobots. My property values are being threatened by a construction zone because she had to be a tyrant." He pointed at my house. "Jack here might be crazy, but he's fighting for our freedom. The freedom to have a slightly messy garage when the world is falling apart. I move for a vote of no confidence in the presidency of Carol Peterson." A loud, passionate chorus of "Aye!" erupted from the 20 or so homeowners gathered on the lawn. It was done. The reign of terror was over. The next morning they came. A delegation of 2. Carol and Stan walked across the lawn toward me. She was not holding a clipboard. Her shoulders were slumped. Her face was pale. She looked smaller somehow. "Mr. Riley," she said, her voice quiet and hoarse. "Jack?" "Carol, Stan," I said, giving them a curt nod. "Decided to brave the industrial zone?" She took a deep breath. The board held a vote. I would like to issue a formal, public apology for shutting down your relief effort. It was an error in judgment." Stan nudged her. "A severe error in judgment," she corrected herself. "The board has also voted to make a $5,000 donation from the HOA's reserve funds to the official relief cause. And we will, of course, fully support you reopening the depot here, or assist in moving it to a more suitable location." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "If you'll please, call off your machines." I looked from her face to the giant yellow crane, which was currently using its massive hook to dangle a single donut down to one of the workers. It was almost disappointing. I was really looking forward to the aerial shingle inspection, but a win is a win. And seeing the look of utter, soul-crushing defeat in her eyes was the only real flagpole I'd ever needed. "All right, Carol," I said slowly. "You've got a deal." I made one phone call. The deconstruction was as impressive as the arrival. In less than an hour, the outriggers were retracted, the booms were lowered, and the engines were firing up for departure. But before they left, Frank had one last task for his crew. As a final act of beautiful, petty, and now authorized construction, they used the smallest crane to lift a tiny, pre-dug section of my lawn. They swung it aside, and another worker quickly poured the single bag of concrete into the hole. Then, the crane lowered the 3-foot, pencil-thin aluminum flagpole into the setting concrete. The job was, technically, complete. Frank walked over and shook my hand, his grip like a vice. "Pleasure doing business with you, Riley," he said with a wink. "You ever decide to go into the demolition business, you give me a call." "I think I've done enough demolishing for 1 week, Frank," I laughed. As the last truck rumbled away, a strange quiet fell over Orchard Lane. It was finally over. A month later, the street was back to normal. But it was a new normal. The oppressive beige silence was gone, replaced by a low hum of actual neighborliness. Dave was the new, reluctantly elected HOA president. His first official act was to pass the Common Sense Clause, which basically stated that no one should be an idiot. The relief effort had been a staggering success. We reopened in my driveway for 2 more days before the city, prodded by a newly helpful Stan Peterson, offered us the use of the high school gymnasium. I ended up co-managing the logistics of the whole operation. They call me Crane Guy now. The neighborhood kids wave at me when I drive by. Mr. Henderson still brings me a can of his finest tuna every Sunday. And Carol? The Petersons sold their house in 2 weeks. I heard they moved to a different state, one with no homeowners association. I like to think she took up a new hobby, like bird watching, or competitive screaming into a pillow. As for the flagpole, it still stands in my front yard. It's absurdly small, a tiny silver toothpick sticking out of the grass. But every morning when I'm out on the porch with Buster, and the sun hits it just right, I swear it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's a monument, not to patriotism, but to the glorious, righteous power of malicious compliance. It's a reminder that while you can't always fight City Hall, you can, if you have the right permits and a little bit of creative anger, park a 100-ton crane in front of it and watch it squirm.